Lila Pinch sat at the edge of the long dining table in Hallowmere's grand hall, her slender fingers tracing the swirling patterns of the bonefish mosaics embedded in the stone. Above her, the enchanted ceiling churned with the storm's restless energy, its surface rippling like the lake itself, casting a shifting silvery light over the hall. The air carried a faint tang of salt and dampness, a constant reminder of the Academy's submerged world. Floating lanterns bobbed lazily in the air, their green glow flickering like distant fireflies, while the low rumble of thunder reverberated through the walls. Lila's sharp hazel eyes flicked toward Edric Vane, who sat across from her, his ember-bright gaze locked on the small, rune-etched tin box cradled in his hands. Their friendship had been born in a moment of chaos, a memory as vivid now as it had been 3 years ago. It was their first week at Hallowmere, and Lila, a nervous first year burdened by her family's scholarly legacy, had been grappling with a volatile potion in Professor Mallow's class. She'd misread the instructions, added too much dragon's breath, and the mixture had begun to hiss and bubble, its surface turning an alarming shade of crimson. Panic had seized her, her hands trembling as she fumbled with her wand, when Edric, a wiry boy with a mop of dark hair, had leapt into action. With a swift flick of his wrist, he'd knocked the cauldron off the flame, sending it clattering to the floor. A plume of acrid smoke had billowed up, stinging their eyes, but disaster was averted. Instead of scolding her, Edric had flashed a grin, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "First rule of potions, always double-check the measurements," he'd teased, his voice cutting through the tension. Lila had been mortified, her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but his laughter had been so warm, so genuine, that she couldn't help but join him. From that day, they'd been inseparable, their bond forged in the crucible of that near catastrophe. Now, as she watched him turn the tin box over in his hands, Lila felt a familiar mix of affection and unease. Edric was more than just her best friend. He was her anchor, the one who'd shown her that magic wasn't just about precision and theory, but about courage and instinct. He'd encouraged her to pursue her passion for ancient magic and runes, even when her peers scoffed at their impracticality. The Pinches were a family of scholars, their names synonymous with dusty tomes and meticulous study, and Lila had arrived at Hallowmere determined to uphold that legacy. But Edric had seen something more in her, a spark of daring she hadn't known she possessed. Yet that same daring now fueled his obsession with the West Passage, a forbidden corridor sealed by ancient magic. Lila's stomach tightened as she considered the risks. Professor Mallow's warnings echoed in her mind. The West Passage is off limits for a reason. Tamper with it, and you'll regret it. The rumors were even worse. Whispers of curses, traps, and creatures that guarded the Academy's deepest secrets. Edric's discovery of the rune-covered key and his cryptic dream about a voice calling him a key-bearer had only deepened his resolve. But Lila couldn't shake her doubts. "Edric," she said, her voice cutting through the hum of the dining hall. "Are you sure about this? The West Passage isn't just some locked broom closet. There are stories, curses, wards, things we might not be ready for." Edric looked up, his eyes meeting hers. There was a flicker of uncertainty in them, quickly masked by determination. "I know, Lila, but I can't ignore this. The dream, the key, it's all connected. I have to find out what it means." Lila sighed, pushing her wire-rimmed glasses up her nose with a practiced gesture. "I get it. I do. But we need to be careful. We don't even know what's behind that door." He nodded, his expression softening. "That's why I need you with me. Your knowledge of runes and ancient magic, it's our best shot. You're the smartest person I know, Lila. I trust you." Her chest warmed at his words, a swell of pride mingling with the weight of responsibility. Runes were her domain, her refuge. She'd spent countless nights in the library, deciphering their intricate patterns, their whispers of power. Her grandmother, a legendary rune master, had filled her childhood with tales of ancient wards and forgotten spells, igniting a passion that had carried Lila to Hallowmere. She was determined to honor that legacy, but she also knew the dangers of meddling with magic she didn't fully understand. "All right," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her stomach. "I'll help you, but we need a plan. We can't just stumble in blind." Edric's grin returned, bright and boyish, easing the tension between them. "That's what I was hoping you'd say. Let's figure this out together." Before they could dive deeper into their strategy, a familiar figure lumbered over to the table. Tobin Grubbs, his arms wrapped around a towering stack of dry black bread, dropped heavily onto the bench beside them. Crumbs spilled from his mouth as he spoke, his voice muffled by his latest bite. "What's this about a plan?" Lila rolled her eyes, though a smile tugged at her lips. "Edric's dragging us into another one of his schemes. We're going to the West Passage tonight." Tobin's round eyes widened, and he nearly choked, coughing up a cloud of crumbs. "The West Passage? Are you mad? Mallow will skin us alive!" Edric leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Not if we don't get caught. Pippa's agreed to create a distraction, something loud in the East Wing. We just need to be quick and quiet." Tobin groaned, slumping so low his chin nearly touched the table. "Why do I always get roped into these things?" "Because you're our friend," Lila said, patting his arm with exaggerated sympathy. "And because you're the only one who can eat an entire loaf of bread without blinking." Tobin muttered something unintelligible, brushing crumbs from his robes, but he didn't argue further. Lila knew he'd stick with them, grumbling all the way. His loyalty was as unyielding as his appetite, a quiet strength that anchored their trio. As they hashed out the details, Pippa's distraction, the timing, the route to the passage, Lila's mind drifted to her own stakes in this adventure. Her love for runes wasn't just academic, it was personal. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Runes are the heartbeat of magic, Lila. They hold secrets older than this lake. Respect them, and they'll guide you. Ignore them, and they'll destroy you." The West Passage was rumored to be sealed with wards of unimaginable power, and if anyone could unravel them, it was her. But the thought of facing such magic, untested, unknown, sent a shiver down her spine. She glanced at Edric, his ember-bright eyes alight with purpose. He carried the weight of his family's tarnished name, a legacy he was desperate to redeem. Lila understood that drive, but she also feared where it might lead him. Still, she couldn't abandon him. Their friendship was a pact, unspoken but unbreakable. "Edric," she said, her tone firm enough to pull him from his thoughts. "If we're doing this, I need to prepare. I'll head to the library and dig up anything I can about the West Passage or the runes on that door." His face lit up with gratitude. "That's brilliant, Lila. Anything you find could make the difference." She nodded, already mentally sifting through the library's vast collection. "I'll meet you at the base of Waterclock Tower after lights out. Don't start without me." Edric chuckled, his grin widening. "Wouldn't dream of it." As Lila stood, Tobin looked up from his bread, his freckled face creased with worry. "Be careful, Lila. I don't like this." She offered him a reassuring smile, though her own nerves fluttered. "I will, Tobin, and don't worry, I'll keep Edric from doing anything too stupid." Edric clutched his chest in mock offense. "Hey, I'm right here," Lila laughed, the sound bright and fleeting, cutting through the hall's heavy air. "Exactly my point." With that, she turned and strode out of the dining hall, her robes swishing around her ankles. The library awaited, her sanctuary of ink and parchment. If there were answers to be found, she'd unearth them there. The Library of Hallowmere was a marvel, a sprawling cavern of knowledge carved into the Academy's heart. Its shelves rose like ancient trees, their branches heavy with leather-bound tomes and scrolls yellowed by time. The air was thick with the musty scent of old paper, tinged with the faint metallic bite of ink. Floating lanterns drifted overhead, their golden light casting long shadows that danced across the stone floor. Lila moved through the aisles with purpose, her fingers brushing the spines as she sought the sections on ancient runes and forbidden passages. She gathered an armful of books, Runes of the Deep, Wards and Guardians, The Founding of Hallowmere, and settled at a secluded table near the back, where the noise of the storm was a distant murmur. The first tome creaked as she opened it, its pages dense with diagrams and annotations in a script she recognized as Old Merrick, a language she'd painstakingly taught herself. She skimmed the text, searching for any hint of the West Passage, her hazel eyes darting across the lines. Hours slipped by. The storm's rumble, a steady companion, as Lila pieced together fragments of the Academy's history. She read of Hallowmere's creation, a sanctuary built beneath the lake to protect its magic from the world above. She found mentions of the Keybearers, an order tasked with safeguarding the Academy's secrets, their identities cloaked in mystery. But the West Passage remained elusive, its purpose shrouded in vague warnings. Sealed for the safety of all, one text read. A door best left unopened, warned another. Frustration gnawed at her until she pulled a slim, dust-covered journal from a high shelf. Its leather binding was cracked, its pages brittle, and the name inscribed on the cover sent a thrill through her. Ilara Moon Shadow, Keybearer. Lila opened it carefully, her breath catching as she traced the faded ink. Ilara's entries chronicled her duties, her pride in her role, and her growing curiosity about the Academy's forbidden corners. One passage, dated over a century ago, stopped Lila cold. The West Passage holds the key to Hallowmere's greatest secret, but it is not for the faint of heart. Only those deemed worthy by the Guardians may pass. I have seen the runes that seal the door, ancient, powerful, alive with intent, but I dare not test them. The lake whispers to those who listen, and I fear what it might say. Lila's pulse quickened. Guardians? The bonefish, perhaps, with their translucent bodies and luminous eyes, or something darker, something born of the lake's depths. She flipped through the journal, desperate for more, but the entries ended abruptly, the final pages torn out as if someone had sought to silence Ilara's words. She sat back, her mind racing. The Guardians were the key, prove their worth, and the passage might open. Fail, and they'd face whatever wrath the wards unleashed. She scribbled notes on a scrap of parchment, her handwriting tight and precise. Guardians, worthiness, runes alive with intent. It wasn't much, but it was a thread to follow. She glanced at the clock on the wall, its hands ticking toward lights out. Time was slipping away. As she closed the journal, a chill prickled her skin. The library's warmth faded, the shadows thickening around her table. The lanterns flickered, their light dimming for a heartbeat before steadying. Lila's head snapped up, her eyes scanning the empty stacks. No one was there, yet the air felt heavy, watchful. She shook off the unease, chalking it up to fatigue and the storm's oppressive presence, and gathered her things. The mist corridor awaited as she left, its enchanted mist swirling in restless patterns around her boots. The storm had grown fiercer, its howls seeping through the walls, and Lila's heart thudded with a mix of anticipation and dread. She clutched her notes, her wand a comforting weight in her pocket, and hurried toward Water Clock Tower. Edric and Tobin were already there when she arrived, huddled at the tower's base. Edric's face was alight with restless energy, the key glowing faintly in his hand, while Tobin clutched his bread pouch, his eyes darting to every shadow. Lila raised her wand, its silver tip illuminating their tense expressions. "Did you find anything?" Edric asked, his voice eager. Lila nodded, unfolding her notes. "There are guardians protecting the passage. According to a key-bearer's journal, we need to prove ourselves worthy, or we won't get through. The runes on the door, they're alive, Edric. They'll judge us." Tobin's face drained of color. "Guardians? Like monsters?" "Maybe," Lila admitted, keeping her tone even. "The journal didn't say. Could be the bonefish, could be something else. We need to be ready for anything." Edric's jaw tightened, but his eyes burned with resolve. "We'll face them together, whatever it takes." Lila admired his courage, even as it unnerved her. He was fearless in a way she'd never be, but that fearlessness had saved her once before. She glanced at Tobin, his freckles stark against his pale skin, and offered a small smile. "We've got this, Tobin. Together." He swallowed hard, nodding reluctantly. "Yeah, together." "Pippa's distraction should hit any minute," Edric said, checking the time. "We move fast. Agreed?" "Agreed," Lila said, her voice sedating her nerves. "Let's go." They turned down the narrow corridor to the west passage, the air growing colder with each step. The walls pressed close, their damp stone glistening in the key's faint light. Runes pulsed faintly along the surfaces, responding to Edric's presence, and Lila's fingers itched to trace them, to unravel their secrets. At the end of the path stood the door, small, unassuming, yet carved with runes that shimmered like liquid silver. Edric hesitated, his gaze flicking to Lila and Tobin. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," Lila replied, gripping her wand tighter. Tobin nodded, his voice a whisper. "Let's just get it over with." Edric slid the key into the lock, its runes flaring bright as it clicked into place. The door groaned open, revealing a spiral staircase plunging into darkness. A faint whisper drifted up, the same voice from Edric's dream. "The key-bearer will unlock the truth." A gust of wind followed, sharp with the scent of brine and decay, and a low, mournful hiss echoed from below. Tobin whimpered, stepping back, but Edric's resolve held firm. "Whatever's down there, we'll handle it." He took the first step, the key's light guiding him. Lila followed, her wand aloft, its silver glow cutting through the gloom. Tobin trailed behind, his breath ragged, but he didn't falter. The stairs descended deeper, the lake's weight pressing down, the air thick and heavy. The runes on the walls pulsed stronger now, their rhythm matching Lila's heartbeat. The adventure had begun, and though fear gnawed at her, Lila drew strength from the friends beside her. Edric's courage, Tobin's loyalty, her own resolve. They were a triad, unbreakable. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it as they always had, together.